of me.
And just to get started, may our pod who helped to plan this meeting please rise. There you go. And if you could just introduce yourselves and say a moment when nature kind of gave you some wonder and awe.
My name is Anna, and a moment when I was in wonder of nature is the first time I saw the planet Jupiter through a telescope. I could not convince myself it was the real thing.
My name is Marty. So every summer my grandparents used to go to Alaska for 5 months, and I visited them when I was 12. And in the middle of catching Alaska, we were out in the water, and I just wanted to stay there forever.
My name's Tyler. In a moment I really connected with nature was this past summer in Utah. Just complete, absolute, utter wilderness in these canyon lands near Escalante. Just beautiful red sandstone. Actually got caught in a lightning storm, which was pretty scary, but I've never seen such beautiful, just like lightning bolts, and the night sky after was just phenomenal. So.
Thank you guys. You can just give them a round of applause. Awesome. So today's our last meeting. It's on interior life. And so Will and Jenna are going to give us a brief framing before we introduce our speaker.
So thanks for joining us for the last meeting of Service Council for the semester. This semester we've been looking at the idea of how does right relationship play out in conjunction to our relationship with all of the natural and cosmological world around us. And so we've been also exploring the pillars of servant leadership as their way in which they kind of connect this conversation. The last pillar that we're looking at for the semester is the idea of spirituality or an interior life. So it's the question of what is the role of that aspect in being a servant leader. And there's a lot of ways to talk about it, but the biggest, I think, connection is the idea of if you're going to be a leader, if you're going to be a servant leader, you need to know where you come from, you need to know what you're grounded in. You need to be able to find yourself centered. Connection is something that's inside of you, but then also extends beyond you. It's bigger than just you. And one of the big reasons why that's so important is because oftentimes doing social justice work just kind of is easy to burn out because maybe you don't see things changing as quickly as you'd like to see them change. And so sometimes it feels like, well, why are we having this conversation? Why are we doing this? It's not going anywhere. And so you have to be able to ground yourself in something deeper or bigger than the immediate reality in front of you, which you can draw from when you start feeling that sense of burnout. So your interior life is your connection to yourself that kind of transcends yourself and brings you back outward. So it's the ability to see beyond just the reality in front of you. It's that imaginative piece that says the way that things are don't have to be the way that they will be, because I can see something beyond what's immediately in front of us. So when looking at this semester, kind of the idea that we've been kind of looking at is, on one hand, what is our right relationship with all of creation around us? And number two, and the bigger thing that goes with that, is the sense of, instead of seeing ourselves as independent or like isolated individuals, how does the idea of right relationship with nature actually flip that on our head to recognize we are part of a larger fabric, we are part of a larger living motion. And so instead of just being these kind of independently like state long flamingos, what does it mean to be a piece of a greater whole? And to recognize that grounding in a bigger living entity as something that feeds and reflects that aspect of your interior life as well. So that's what we're going to kind of be looking at today.
I don't think I can improve and or add to any of that. So, Jenna, with that, if someone would like to do an introduction.
Okay. So our speaker today is Shelley DePaul, and she is a member of the Lenape tribe in Pennsylvania. So Shelley serves on the council of the Lenape Nation of Pennsylvania. She's worked for the Lenape Nation of Pennsylvania since 2004 as a genealogy researcher, historical researcher, Lenape language specialist, and educator. And in June of 2009, she was appointed assistant chief. She's developed the Lenape language curriculum for use in schools, universities, and homeschools associations. She has transcribed a variety of works into the Lenape language and composes original music and poetry in the language as well. She is a co-creator of the exhibit displayed at the University of Pennsylvania Museum, fulfilling a prophecy, the past and the present of the Lenape in Pennsylvania. She is also curator of the Lenape exhibit in the Seagal Museum in Houston. She has a bachelor's in education, a master's in history, and teaches English, history, and music in public schools and universities throughout Eastern PA. She also teaches private lessons in piano, guitar, and Native American flute. She is currently teaching courses in Lenape language at Swarthmore.
Well, thanks. I'm really excited to be here today. Who's the student that was at the food justice workshop? Is she here? Remember the one you said there was a...
Michelle Velez.
Oh, okay. Oh, well, thank her for me. I was hoping to see her again. So this was sort of last minute, and I'm excited about it. Although we've sort of partnered with Villanova through Robin. What department do you work in?
I was in multicultural affairs, now I'm over in mechanical engineering.
Okay. But Robin was done a lot for our tribe over the years, and so Villanova was kind enough to offer their printing services, which is a big deal for us. And so we worked in that respect, but I've not done a program here before. It's a gorgeous campus. I would really love to have a chance to get inside your church. It's just awesome walking up that sidewalk. And so we were just doing at Haverford a food justice workshop for students that are working on food justice. And we've been talking a little bit about ways to eat more naturally, and in an easy way, not a difficult way. And so one of the students there was from Villanova, and I guess that's how I wound up here. So it's really exciting, and I'm really excited to meet you guys. As I said to that group of students, I've been working. Not everyone is all that dedicated to food justice and staying close to eating naturally and doing things according to natural law, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. But it is something that is very important to me and certain members of our tribe. And so I've gone completely organic. I refuse to buy anything that isn't what I refer to as natural, meaning in its natural state, no GMOs, no. And I do that for you guys because I think it's really important that you have good food and that your children have good food and things. I think there's sort of a turning point now. So it's real easy, as they were just saying, to feel isolated in that, especially where I live, because I live in the woods. Okay, and it's kind of easy to feel isolated in the things that you find close to your heart, that you work on. And but I just did it feeling, well, I'm going to do it. Okay, that's something. And so getting out and talking to these students that came to Haverford from a number of colleges in the area, and finding that this generation is really working on some of these issues. This one was food justice. There's all sorts of justice, that needs to be addressed. And I'm sorry that it does need to be addressed. It would be nice to live in a community where you could, just study the things you love to do and not have to work maybe so hard all the time on that. But it's good to know that it makes me really happy to know that the younger generation is really active, in doing things in that respect. So when I do these sorts of talks, there is so much to talk about regarding Lenape culture that that I would like to talk about those issues that are important to you or whatever you might be studying or what, So actually, we had quite a large discussion with a few people that were here before you came in. So I'm happy to invite questions to gear me in the direction of, issues that you might want to talk about. I think I've been invited to maybe talk a little bit about the way we view what we refer to as all our relations. So I'll kind of start there, but there's all sorts of things that we could talk about. I could talk about the history of the Lenape people, how they were dispersed, and there's all the different tribes that are in different places, and now they've got different political histories and different goals and different I probably will only talk about our tribe here in Pennsylvania and what we do, because a lot of people don't even know we're here. But like I said, don't wait till the end or anything. Don't feel that you can't interrupt me. I feel very comfortable here because this is how we would hold a council. We do everything in a circle, and the reason for that being that if you blow a bubble, what's the shape? So our people, you gotta try to imagine. I ask everybody when I try to get them to imagine what it's like to view the world as a Native American, particularly Lenape, because not all Native Americans are alike, but we pretty much all have that sort of same cosmic philosophy. I try to ask you for just a little while to wipe your slate clean of everything. You know, whatever you've been taught or to believe, and just put yourself out in the natural world and pretend you're a baby and you don't know anything. You're completely innocent. And that's sort of what it's like to be a Native American. We lived in the natural world. Native Americans have, particularly Lenape, have incredible humility. So it would never occur to them to think that, you know, they see all of these wonderful things in nature. They see the animals, the trees, the sun, the moon, the weather. And it would never occur to them to think that they're more important than any of those things. So you have to begin there. You know, you have to begin by not thinking that everything was put here for humans, or you'll never understand a Native American, because they don't think that way. So I like to begin when talking sort of about our kind of spiritual view with a story that my chief often tells, and I was hoping he could join me here today, but he was not able to come with me. And that is that when the first Europeans came to our continent and spoke to us, the first question that they asked us was, how many of you are there? And this is a question that we did not know how to answer. Because how do you count the stars in the sky? How do you count the blades of grass? How do you count the trees and the plants and the animals? So we have a word that we use for all of the elements in nature, and it's just simply Elangumangi, which is all our relations. So Native Americans have lived out there among all of these things for so long that they just have an incredible respect. They've become closer connected with the life force in everything. And so Native Americans live according to what they refer to as Creator's law or natural law. In other words, what is. You watch how things procreate and you become a part of that. Lenape people believe in leaving no tracks or leaving no trace. You don't see huge monuments to the Lenape. It's sacred to go back to the ground. When they're buried, they have a little marker. That's a wooden marker, certain type for a man, certain type for a woman. That's put there. When it disintegrates, it's gone, and that's how it's supposed to be. So that, coupled with the incredible acidity of the soil around here, is the reason that there really isn't a whole lot left of Lenape artifacts other than stonework, some pottery. But we do have a lot of that. I won't get into sacred sites because I could spend the whole time on that. So it's really important to be able to maybe take a little time and imagine yourself, you know, living out in the woods and dealing with the relations, what we refer to as the relations all the time, and having that ability to communicate, because there is an ability to communicate. It's funny, somebody put on my Facebook a while ago, scientists now have discovered that plants communicate with each other. And I felt like saying, well, yeah. It takes these scientists forever to catch up, doesn't it? Because that's something our people have known for a long time. But it's really difficult sometimes for us, because we've developed, you know, for human beings, because they've developed such a belief that they're more important than everything else on the planet and not a part of it. I don't even like the word environmental, although I love the people that are involved in those projects, but just the word environmental itself suggests that it's somehow away from you or not part of you. We also had some conversations with the students at Haverford. Many of them are vegetarian and they don't like the violence done upon animals. I'll talk a little bit more about that later too, and that's why they don't eat meat. But I tried to impress upon them that even with animals, the life force in everything is equal. So it's not anymore, there's really no more injustice, if you want to use that word, in eating an animal than there is in eating a plant or the bark off a tree. And so if you can really go that far in imagining the life force in all our relations, it's just easier to communicate with an animal because they have eyes and they seem to have emotions. You know, but trees are just as important and plants are just as important, and everything has, you know, the same life force. So when talking about how we treat all our relations, I guess I could get maybe a little bit into the structure of the tribe. But for example, it's hunting season now, so it's a good time to talk about how we hunt. The main thing is, as some people have brought up, the violence that is imposed upon animals. I can't go past the meat counter in the grocery store without praying, okay? Native Americans pray for anything that has passed on. So if there's roadkill, I'll say a prayer. Our elders will stop and drop tobacco, and that causes a heck of a problem on the school kill. So that is an issue, though, and that's another reason that I eat organically. That's okay. Did somebody hit you?
There's a chair.
Wow, that was a weird sound. So that definitely is an issue. But, you know, for example, for the Lenape here, the deer is our buffalo. You know, you hear a lot about the Western tribes, not so much about the Lenape. I assume you know that we lived all the way from New York, all of New Jersey, down to northern Delaware. That was Lenape territory. So the deer is sacred to us. It provides us with almost all of our, not almost all, but a lot of our food. So before we would go out to, did anyone see Last of the Mohicans? So do you remember the part where they had to kill the deer and Chingachgook said the prayer? That was actually, they actually used the Lenape language. They did. They must have researched the language because they use it. But that's very much how it is. Okay, we consider all living things our brothers and sisters. And, but we're very practical. We look around and see how things are. Some species are food for other species, whether it be plant or animal, and we've been food for certain species too in certain places. You know, but we address the deer as our brother. We say a prayer. We give great thanks. We would never shoot the biggest buck with the biggest rack so that we can hang that rack on our wall and be a me big hunter. Okay, that's terrible. In fact, we would let an elder deer go out of respect, or the elder of anything go, because we have incredible respect for elders. The elders are the wise ones in our tribe. Those are the ones who make the decisions. And we wouldn't chop down an older tree. We would not kill an older deer. We would choose one that's just adequate for our needs, and I could do this whole workshop on how we use every bit of that deer, every bit. Every little bone for fish hooks, every toenail for rattles, you know, the sinew, how we use the brains to tan the hides. Every bit of the deer is used. But beyond that, we feel that anything that we bring into our system, we become one with that. It's a sacred thing. You know, that life force is carried on through us, the nourishment that it gives us and our children. And it's the same with plants. If we harvest a plant, we drop tobacco, we ask permission to harvest that plant for that day. And there's a prayer that's said and there's tobacco is dropped. And then we have permission just for that day to harvest that specific plant. And so then we won't take that plant that we offered the tobacco to. We never take the first plant. We'll go then and find others of that species, you know, because of the respect of offering the tobacco to that plant, but also because if you never take the first one, you'll never take the last one. So it's sort of a conservation thing. So you have to sort of begin there. And so if you really believe that that the natural law is creator's law, then all you have to do is observe how that works to know how to act and what to do. And so in our ways of learning how to live, a lot of it comes from observing nature. And that's why we have different clans. I'm Wolf Clan. I live in the Poconos. That's Wolf Clan territory. That's where the wolf lived. That's where the wolf will teach you what to eat, how to live, how to hunt, because they've been there for a long time and they know how to do that. So the wolf is sacred to me because it's my clan, and so on my regalia, you might see, I don't have my official regalia on today, you would see symbols of that clan. So that's the relationship that we have. It's a practical relationship in realizing that it is necessary sometimes, you know, to use the things in some of our relations for food and shelter. But the main thing is that respect is given and that the value of life is respected for everything and that everything had a good life. You know, the deer run wild, you know, and that's another reason why especially when I see how they treat the chickens. I won't touch an egg that isn't organic, you know, from grass-fed. Well, I have my own chickens, so I don't have to worry about that. See, now here's a decision I have to make because I've had them for 4 years and they're done laying. So I have to get new laying hens, and now it's time to eat those chickens. So it's not an easy thing to do because I purposefully didn't give these ones names because I gave the last ones names. So it is sort of a dilemma, but it is sort of the natural way. And so, again, it's the respect that you give. I mean, I think everyone can pretty much agree that it's not how long you live, but the quality of your life. And, you know, that you've been able to be free to choose what you want to do and have been able to run and get fresh air and that kind of thing. So, so again, the natural law for us, the only law is the natural law, and it's what you see around you. And if you follow that, then creation will perpetuate itself. And the problem now is that so much of trying to provide for the human race, more so than everyone, the other races on the planet, is going against natural law. So that's one of the issues that I'm sure you guys have to think about and deal with. So, does anyone have any questions so far on that? Because I'd like to get a little bit more into maybe our tribal structure and the roles. You guys talked about leadership roles and stuff, so I thought I might talk a little bit about how that works in our tribe. Any questions? Any direction y'all want me to talk in or about?
Just briefly, Kelly, you did announce that you were from the Wolf Clan, but maybe they don't know what the other clans are.
Okay. Well, let's start with clans, because that'll get us into the family structure. There are three major clans of the Lenape people. The Wolf Clan is from New York down to, say, the Wind Gap area, Delaware Water Gap area, which is where I'm from. And then from Lehigh Valley down to through the Delaware Valley, that was all Turtle Clan. Okay, the Valley people, and there are differences in those people. Like the Muncie, they were called Muncie. Wolf Clan is Muncie. Turtle Clan is Unami, right here. And below that was Turkey Clan, Unlaktigo. So those were the three major clans. Because there were sort of distinctional differences between those Lenape peoples. Like I said, the Muncie were more rugged, less sociable. They had to live in the mountains, so they were more hunter-gatherers. The Unami were more valley people. They did a little bit more cultivating. And the Turkey Clan, except for one of our members now, is, and her family is pretty much extinct in our tribe. I'm not sure too many exist. We have quite a few Unami still left in our tribe, and we actually have a majority of Munsee in our tribe. But within those 3 clans, there would have been hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of clans, because in a Lenape family, your clan is what you would consider like your last name. So the Lenape were very different from other tribes in that they weren't confederated people. We're very gentle people. We were one of the oldest tribes in the area. In fact, we were called the grandfather tribe. And we've been here for over 13,000 years. That's pre-Sumerian. And that's why we're called the original people, even amongst the other tribes. And if they had issues, they would come to the Lenape to settle the issues, because we were known as the peaceable people and the oldest people that had been here for a long time. So I like to impress upon people that if the first European settlers had met maybe some other tribe other than the Lenape, Thanksgiving would be a whole different story today than it is, because we were very welcoming to people. But we're not interested in federating or politics. We lived in small family units. And there could be quite a bit of cultural difference between many of those family units. But a particular tribe would maybe consist of 20 to 30 people. And they would all be extended family. So you would live with your grandparents and your great-grandparents if they were still alive, and your uncles and your aunts. And that would basically be a clan. You could be Deer Clan, you could be Oak Tree Clan, you could be whatever. But the reason for clans was basically to prevent incest. So you would never marry into your own clan because it's going to be family. So it was kind of like a last name. Your name would be John Wolf or John Turkey or John Tree or whatever. But within the family structure, it was matrilineal. So if you married a Lenape woman, you would go to live with her family. And the children would take on the clan of the mother's family. So that's how it goes in Lenape. And I think also in Iroquois to a large degree. So that's kind of how marriages worked. Structurally, the tribe is made up of, as I said, all of these family members. And if we were to have a council, we would sit in a circle like this. And as I said, everyone in the circle, if there was an issue to discuss, everyone would give their thoughts, from the youngest child to the oldest person. And then there would be a council of elders, both men and women, that would consider the issues. And they would make the decisions. And if it came to an extremely difficult decision, the sole responsibility rests on the elder women in the tribe. So they were the ones. Some people call them clan mothers, or we just call them the wise women in the tribe. And we still, the Lenape here in Pennsylvania still follow those traditions, and we're the only tribe that does. Many of the other tribes have become federally recognized and have gotten into, elections and voting and lobbying, and I think it's one of the reasons we have such a secure, and our clan mothers are well loved and respected by all the people in our tribe. And it's really comforting to know that you have clan mothers to make those decisions, and that they're going to make them for the good of all people and not because somebody's lobbying for some private interest. That doesn't happen in true Lenape or true tribal living. And it's not just our, many native cultures do that. So the Lenape women even are responsible for appointing the chief. So the chief would be male. I'm assistant chief right now, but that's extremely rare. And it's because there weren't any other suckers. No, it's because I'm very close to our chief and I'm able to help him right now. But I kind of just consider myself holding the post until some of our younger men that are coming up are old enough to take over, because it is a nice balance. So the men would technically be chief. But if there were issues with the chief, the clan mothers would have the power to say, you need to make wiser decisions, or, maybe you shouldn't be chief anymore. But Lenape people are very gentle people, and we don't like to, we believe in something like karma. We don't believe in saying bad things about other people. There's always a way around that. We believe in, if it gets bad enough, what we do is shun. We just don't talk to that person ever again, if it has to come to that point. But there's always a way, and we've had some pretty hot councils, but I can't remember one where people actually, I mean, they were hot, but I don't think anybody ever like laid out anybody. And you know, we don't, I mean, there's going to be disagreements, but we really don't do that. So we try to deal with things without, but sometimes that's why it's nice to be able to speak a language no one understands. So you can say stuff and they don't know what you're saying, so there's no bad karma. But anyway, basically that's the tribal structure. So everyone in the tribe is has their say. The most important thing, and I've been called all kinds of names by different kinds of people for just talking about how my people live, including communist or whatever. But what I refer to it is as tribal living. I like to call it tribal living. And in a tribe, pretty much everyone looks out for the welfare of everyone else. There's a tribal doctor, and he would treat everyone in the tribe, not just ones with health insurance. And the most important, it's really up to the grandparents to teach the children, because the moms and dads are busy. They're raising kids, they're working. Once you become a grandparent, technically you're done. I mean, you can still make baskets and you can still do a lot of the work in the tribe, but technically they would go to their children's house and they would be fed and they would be taken care of. In fact, to this day, if we have a feast, our elders are taken care of first. No one would dream of getting up to eat until the elders are fed. And then the women and children, and then the young men, which we still call warriors, and then the chief eats last. The thought behind that being that the chief doesn't eat until he knows that his people are fed. So the grandparents are the ones that basically pass the culture on down to the young ones and teach them the stories and the traditions. And the most important thing that they can do is help a child on his path. To the Lenape, each person has a gift and a path to follow. And if you're on that path, you're going to be happy because you're going to be doing what you love to do. So they'll watch the little ones run around and say, up, future chief, up, auto mechanic, look at that one wandering off, artist, you know. And so it's their job to get you on your path so that you can contribute, you know, in whatever way you were meant to. It's your sacred path. This is also the reason, you know, for the Vision Quest, which you've probably heard about when you become an adult or a young adult. Also, your time to go out, listen to the relations, find out which are your spirit animals or plants or elements of nature that are guiding you, because the natives believe that there are those elements. And if you spend enough time out there, you'll find the ones that are following. Like if porcupines follow you around all over the place, there's a reason for that. You know, you should listen to what they have to teach you. And I've actually seen this happen, and it's pretty amazing in my own life, I mean, with my own path. But anyway, so the elders are the ones to teach the younger ones, help them get on their path, and that's sacred and that's really important. And so in our tribe, even to this day, if we can, we do as much bartering as possible, because money, we try to just keep that out completely. Once you start on the money trail, then you're going to start losing your soul. You're going to start losing your peace, spirit, and I've seen it happen to many good Native Americans, and many tribes have been offered things by the government. So as much bartering as we can do, we do, and we've done a lot of that. We bartered for our cultural center. I teach music lessons, and I have a guy who fixes my house. If anything's wrong, I call him up, he comes, and I teach his kids music. So we do as much of that kind of bartering as we can. Of course, in this day and age, it's really hard. I'm getting paid to talk to you guys today, and I can use it. I'd rather not. I'd rather that we were finally living in a you know, a tribal way like our ancestors did, where I could come here and speak to you, and then you guys could, whatever, you know, whatever. I could teach here, and I like that. My path is teaching, so that's what I love to do, and that's what I have done. I've been a public school teacher. I teach music lessons. I do that. But anyway, so we did a lot of bartering, and so there wasn't any, we really didn't know what money was. We had something called wampum, but that was way more sacred than money. It was something that we would trade, but it also involved sort of a covenant with the person we offered it to, and it was really used for more ceremonial or sealing a pact or an agreement or covenant. So really trading money and all that kind of thing didn't come into existence. We traded. There's always a lot of trading. But that whole thing, the issue over money and all that kind of thing really didn't happen until European contact and the Beaver Wars, which you might have, beaver pelts started all kinds of wars, which you might have studied. If not, you can look that up on the internet, because I want to try to talk about stuff that you can't read in books. So that talks a little bit about what it would be like to live tribally. Has anyone ever heard of Indian giving? Yeah, you should have heard of that. And it's kind of a negative thing, right? You Indian giver, somebody takes something back they gave you. Well, we do that. But let me explain where it really came from. We believe that if you have something, that you need it or that you should use it. So if I give you something, because I feel that you need it or you ask for it, then as long as you're using it, then I'm really glad to let you have it. But if I see that you're not using it, then it's within my rights to take it back. It would be an incredibly disgraceful thing to hoard or to have anything more than you need. You should have everything you need and more. I mean, I'm a musician. I've got a fetish for guitars. I got 10 of them. It's okay. I mean, it's okay to indulge in the things you love to do, but extreme excess would be really looked down upon in the tribe. So those kinds of that, I guess these, I try to teach tribal living, and that's why I'm called a communist, because everybody's, well, that's communism. And I'm like, well, our people were doing it way before Lenin. So I don't know, I call it tribal living. He copied from us. But see, another thing too with communism isn't that sort of an economic system? So you take the economics out of communism and you kind of do have tribal living, except the difference between maybe communism and tribal living is that in Lenape living, the individual is extremely exalted, each individual. Whereas with communism, it's like everybody for the state, right? No. And like I said about the elders teaching the young children, it's because they need to develop that individual. And that goes into what we're talking about, everything comes full circle when you talk about Native American stuff. We're talking about all our relations, okay? Every tree, every plant, every squirrel, every spider, every child, every human contributes to the whole of life. And I guess I'm assuming many of you have studied ecosystems. One of the big things now are the wolves out in Wyoming. They had all kinds of environmental issues out there when they had killed them all years ago. They were killing off wolves. And then they had all these environmental issues, overpopulations of species that were eating the grasses and, that kind of thing. And so they protected the wolves. And the wolves came back, and guess what? The ecosystem recovered because they were keeping in balance. The creator, with natural law, knew what he was doing. He created balance, and it all works. We've got the intelligence to see that and to help that along, or to just deny that it exists. There's no global warming. So as you can see, every individual is extremely important. And so that would be the difference in tribal living. Each person is valued. So any questions up till now? No.
You mentioned that you had an experience where you kind of were able to see the signs of nature and follow your own path. I was wondering if you wouldn't mind sharing one of those experiences? I don't know if that's
I
too much
could.
to ask.
I actually have it on video. I used to be the sort of videographer for the tribe when I first came in many years ago, before I was even on council. So I was, well, that's a whole nother thing too, which I won't even get into, taking video, because that's a hard thing to do with our people. Not everyone will. I think that was the microphone. It's on the floor. Okay, yeah, I can share this story. So, quite a long time ago, I got I had certain things that were giving me signs that special birds for me, or spirit birds for me, were doves and crows. Okay, and I had 2 experiences that just blew me away with that. One, I was walking out of a student's house. I teach piano lessons, music lessons, and this was before the exhibit. Right in front of me, in their perfectly groomed lawn with no weeds or any good stuff to eat, were 4 crow feathers sticking out of the ground. Now, you have to realize that our prophecy is the prophecy of the 4 crows, and we were just beginning to explain that prophecy and come full circle with that. And if I have time, I'll tell you that prophecy. But that was just really powerful. And then when my chief was going through a teaching session with me, we walked not far from here. There's a park, Norristown area, I guess. And so he was giving me some instruction, and I actually had been taking some video. We were doing an herb walk too, so I've been taking some video of herbs in the park. And I had left it just running there, mainly because I just wanted to have a record of some of the things he was teaching me, so I wouldn't forget them. So anyway, as we were sitting there, there was a dead tree. We were looking out on a field, and there was just this dead tree in the field. And as we were speaking, he was talking to me about what I'm saying to you, that you got to listen to nature, and certain things, you just have to wake up to them speaking to you. Like, and he was saying, if you see ants marching in a certain direction, think about why they're doing that and what you're thinking of at the time, and how that can relate to what's important to you. And as he was saying that, one by one, these crows started filling up this dead tree, out in the middle of this field, until, maybe within 10 minutes or so, there were like 30, 35 crows in that tree. Yeah, it was just weird. And then and it was as he was giving me this sort of really important teaching, from chief to assistant chief. And so that I mean, it might not even sound like much, but I knew. I mean, I just knew when they started coming, between those 2 things. And there have been other things too. But the connection with the crow. And so I've studied and I watch them, and they teach me a lot. But they're not the only animals that have spoken to me. A lot of the reason that I began working on the language was that I've always loved languages. And I was actually working on my master's, and my thesis was on Irish history, on Sinn Féin. And so I was learning Gaelic because I always thought it was important to know something about the language of the people that you're studying, and I was really fascinated with the Gaelic language. And then I was actually sitting out by my stream. I'm lucky enough to live right next to a stream in the woods. And it was sort of like an epiphany. It was all of a sudden I'm looking at the trees here, and I'm studying, this Gaelic language and this culture across the ocean, which my grandmother was Irish, so maybe that's why. And then it was almost as if the trees and the water spoke to me and said, why aren't you speaking our language? And I don't know why. And then all of a sudden it was very important to me. I dropped everything. I dropped Gaelic immediately. Got my thesis finished, I don't know, 6 years later or so. But, and then I started learning the language, and I found that as I would go out and do prayer with the language, that using those words, with those relations, made it easier to communicate. They would perk up, the water would perk up, And I could sound like a total crazy person saying this unless you know how that feels or what that is. And it involves spending a lot of time realizing that there is life force and they do communicate. Plants know when you love them. Okay, breathe on them, give them their carbon dioxide, which they need too, but everything responds to love. You can look an animal in the eyes and it knows you're not threatened. They respond to fear too, so you have to try not to be afraid. I keep telling the little kids that when they run from bees, I'm like, don't run from bees, it puts them in a frenzy. Get mad at them and they'll go away. But no, and that's why, getting into talking about genetically modified foods. If you really think of plants as our relations, is it any more ethical to genetically modify a plant than it would be to genetically modify a human being? And trust me, they're doing that too. Is it really? I mean, doesn't it take a lot of nerve to do that? And just because we've learned this much about how Creator put all this stuff together, there's so much more we don't know, about how plants interact and what they do, that it's just, not according to natural law to do that. There are better ways, in tribal thinking. There are better ways, by working with the harmony of nature to deal with any issues, food issues. I mean, there have been studies done on how organic farming and gardening could work in Africa and feed those people. But then Monsanto and Bill Gates aren't going to make a whole lot of money out of it. So it's a big issue. A lot of these things are really big issues for you guys today. And never feel that any small ripple you make or any small thing you do doesn't make a big difference. Because I'm finding that little tiny things I've done by simply saying, I'm not buying that. I'm not eating that. Imagine if, half the people in the United States said, I'm not ever eating another genetically modified food. They just wouldn't make it anymore. So every ripple that you make, every word you speak, every little thing that you do, because how many of you felt like it's hopeless? It's something that you're doing, it's just why, it's hopeless. It isn't. And that was just such a wonderful thing for me to realize. It's not hopeless. All kinds of, miracles can happen. Just looking at you guys sitting here, that group that I was talking to at Haverford, too. It's amazing, what can be done. So there are other aspects of the culture I could talk about. Does anyone have anything? Robin, how much time do we have?
We've got about 12 minutes.
Okay, well, let's open it up to questions. There's all kinds of things I could talk about. I could talk about, just to let you know who the Lenape in Pennsylvania are. Many years ago, before European encroachment, the Lenape who lived here, when the first immigrants started coming in, particularly from Germany, there was no one to marry here but Lenape people. So a lot of marriages occurred, and it's mostly between the Lenape and the Germans, although it has taken, there are Irish and some other too, but the Germans were mostly interested in, first of all, religious freedom, and second of all, they weren't interested in politics, and they were sort of looked down upon by the people in political power, and discriminated against as well, but they didn't care. They wanted to farm, okay? They wanted to move out into the outskirts and farm. So many of our families today are descended from Quaker, Pennsylvania Dutch, and German marriages that occurred. I do a lot of the genealogical history, so I could give you a lot of the details. But one of our earliest families was the daughter of family who settled Germantown down here. Philip Daughter settled Germantown. His brother Johannes didn't stick around. Philip became very famous as a politician in early Germantown history. These are some of my ancestors I'm talking about, so I know about them. Johannes went to Berks County, then he moved up into Northampton County, where I live now, which is actually Monroe County now, but Northampton County used to encompass that whole area. But anyway, just so there's a lot of stories about the removal and different places we found refuge. But those of us that remained had to assimilate. We weren't permitted to practice our religion. We weren't permitted to, we had to, on the outside, assimilate. But it's very important to any Native American to stay in their sacred land, okay? We have great respect for our ancestors that have lived here for 13,000 years. We are connected to every one of those relations I was telling you about. And so the land and the Delaware River are very sacred to us. And there are all kinds of stories about how, that the removal was a very tragic thing, and a lot of people knew ahead of time. A lot of them weren't going to make it. A lot of them weren't going to live. Children died along the road. There are many women that just left their children behind with some of these families and some of these Christian families so that they would survive. But also it was a very intentional thing to plant the seed in the homeland. So what you're going to find, like a lot of these early German families had like 12 kids, okay? So maybe these 6 were German and these were Lenape German. What you find is that once these Lenape German lines were established, they stuck together. You can see it in the cemeteries if you know what the families are. So the Lenape German line in this family would marry the Lenape German line in this family, and they would stick together so that they would keep the bloodline strong. So most of us that are descended from these marriages are descended from like a woven tapestry of many Lenape lines that feed into each other. The exhibit that she was talking about that we had at the University of Pennsylvania tells the story of the Lenape who stayed here and how we passed our culture along, hiding in plain sight because we weren't permitted to pass it along outwardly. We couldn't practice our religion, so our medicine bags might be made to look like sachets in our drawer. We would have a circle of stones around our flower beds that would be our prayer circles, so it wouldn't look like a prayer circle. Those stones, once those prayers were put into them, were passed down to the next generation. And Carol's still got her grandmother's stones that were passed down to her. Grandmothers would give their children a doll where if you would lift the hair up, you would see a face stitched under that hair the same color as the skin to show them you show one face to the world, another face in secret. So these are just a few. We even had a stencil that looked like a German stencil, but it was all Lenape symbology, but you wouldn't know it unless you were Lenape. And these stencils would be in their homes. So all of these and more of the artifacts that tell the particular story of the Lenape who remained in Pennsylvania, we showed that exhibit at the University of Pennsylvania for 3 years. Then the exhibit finally closed, and now we've moved it to our Easton Cultural Center. So if you'd like to visit, you can. Or if you just go on our website, there's a lot of information about it on there. So we are the Lenape that remained here. The story of the 4 crows that I was telling you about is an old prophecy of ours. It goes like this. A fox will be let loose upon the land, and 4 crows will come. The first crow lived in harmony with Creator. The second crow got sick and died. The third crow saw what happened to his brother, the second crow, and hid. And the fourth crow lived in harmony with Creator again. So this is a story that was a really, really old story that our chief now interprets as meaning the 4 times of the Lenape people. So living in harmony with Creator for many hundreds of years. The second crow would be European contact. The third crow is this hiding time where we had to hide our culture but kept it going. And then the fourth crow is coming out and living in harmony with Creator again and partnering with all those other people who want to do that and bringing things full circle. So our chief believes that the fourth crow really started when we had our first river journey. We do that every 4 years, and we actually signed a treaty. It was historic between the good people of Pennsylvania and the Lenape people. We did that in 2002. And we took a trip down the Delaware all the way from Hancock to Cape May. And along the way, we met with people who were caretaking for the river, or some of them were churches, some of them were individuals, artists, historical societies. Who do you know down here? Arch Street Methodist Church, Wissahickon, Friends of the Wissahickon, Delaware Highlands Conservancy, that's up north. It's Delaware River Greatway Partnership, Tinnacan Conservancy. All these people are partners of ours and have now signed the treaty. So we have a huge network. We renew this treaty every 4 years. So we did it in 2006. We got more treaty signers. We did it in 2010 at the University of Pennsylvania. And now we've got over 50 organizations and over 150 individuals that have signed the treaty. So we have a huge network. So when people say we don't have recognition in Pennsylvania, I just don't believe it anymore. We've got more than enough from the people that matter. And we will be doing this trip again in 2014. And you guys are all welcome to join us when we get to this part of the river. It takes us about 3 weeks to get down the river all the way, and we're going to go all the way to Cape May this time. So that tells you a little bit about the Lenape who are here in Pennsylvania. We are a non-gambling tribe. We still follow our traditional ways, and we basically are interested more in educating, partnering, working on many environmental issues to caretake for the Delaware River especially, and our homeland. So I'm done. Any questions anyone has? Okay.
I know that you told us not to assume, take anything that we might automatically have been told about different tribes. But I was a little bit interested in the idea that you were like the film person, or the person who like filmed everything. Like, does your tribe have any rules against
Yeah. Most of them don't want to be filmed. We had a real issue. See, this is the particular issue of the people in Pennsylvania, the Lenape in Pennsylvania, is that we aren't a reservation. So that our people are spread all over the place. We have people up in Lackawaxen area. We have people in Wyoming Valley. We've got people down in Cape May, Philadelphia, Flemington, as far as Reading, and then even beyond. There are people in Oklahoma. We've got people in Georgia. That have just been dispersed. So because of that, what happened as a historian, I would go to these gatherings that we have with our elders, with Chief Bob, and they'd be sitting there talking about this, so much incredible stuff about culture and herbal knowledge. Pam down at Turtle's Farm, and I'm sitting there as a historian saying, we really need to preserve this. In the old days, you didn't have to worry because it was a small tribal thing. The culture was passed along orally to the next generation, and that just kept going forever because the tribe was intact. But now that the tribe wasn't intact, I'm thinking, these kids here are never going to look in this elder's face and hear this elder telling the story, and it made me want to cry. And the only way I could think of to be able to have a place where our children could see our elders telling these stories was to videotape them. So Chief Bob and I started this family history project where we were going around to the many, many elders he knew, and many of them have passed on now, so it's a good deal that we got them on video. And we tried, and we met a lot of resistance, because they don't believe in being videotaped or even audio taped. And we promised them, we explained it this way, and we promised them that it would be for the benefit of our tribe, so that our children could look in their faces the way they should be able to look in the faces of their elders. And it would be completely private and only part of the Lenape Nation archives, So that was the deal. And so we did get a number of elders, some we never will, but we got a lot of them to agree to this family history project. We had a little Yahoo group, and we're able to do that. To make a long story short, a lot of this information is what wound up in the exhibit at the University of Pennsylvania. So we were actually friends with some of the people there, and when they came to one of our maple ceremonies to bring an artifact to our tribe, actually, that belonged to us. And we were talking about the Family History Project, and that's when the idea came to tell the story of the Lenape in Pennsylvania. So then we had to go back to all those elders and say, okay, the university wants to do this project. Do you want us to include any of the teachings that you gave us? And some of them agreed and others didn't, and so, but that's kind of how actually the exhibit came about too, and how we gathered a lot of the information for that. Someone else had a question? Anyone? Yeah.
Could you elaborate on some of your spiritual traditions or just how you practice prayer?
How we practice? Well, every ceremony, we have 4 major ceremonies, and they come with the turning of the seasons, okay? Midwinter is storytelling time. It always begins with a prayer, and then there's for most ceremonies, the pipe is passed around, still to this day, which contains herbs, healing herbs, and some tobacco. And then depending on the ceremony, they're all different, you know, some different, it's a lot of storytelling. You know, stories will be told. For the maple ceremony, there are certain stories. Midwinter is storytelling time, so lots of stories are told then. And then there's the water ceremony, which is kind of like a baptism. We go to the river, and it's not really baptism in the Christian sense, but it's like washing away the cares of the last year. And then our measing ceremony would take me the whole hour to talk to you about that. It's a very important ceremony. I don't like to say any's most important, and that takes place in the fall. And then we have corn planting. The women do that while the men drum, and that's done in the summer. And we keep the seed from each that's become sacred, and we make sure we keep using that native seed from year to year. But it always begins with a prayer, giving thanks, and then storytelling and feast. There has to be eating, and there's dancing, and that kind of thing. So I guess he had asked me if I would say a prayer. I can do that, but you can't record the prayer. We don't record our prayers. Okay, so if you could just turn off the recorder for that.